Hi there, my name is Anna, but you can call me Anchi, and I'm a host of the Binge on Self-Love podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome and thank you so much for being here. And if you've tuned in before, it's great to have you back. Binge on Self-Love podcast started with me in my bedroom, recording and sharing my journey with binge eating disorder and with procrastination. But we are so much more than our eating disorder, and we are so much more than our problems. So this podcast is essentially about accepting yourself and everything that comes with it. Growth, pain, relationships, boundaries, habits, comparison, body image, confidence, you name it. Plus, you'll catch me having some insightful conversations with fantastic guests who open up and share their stories. So make sure to subscribe to the Binge on Self-Love on your favorite platform and join me every Tuesday for a brand new episode. Binge on Self-Love podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It doesn't provide professional medical advice and it is not a substitute for diagnosis or treatment. Hi, my name is Anna, but you can call me Anchi, and I'm a host of the Binge on Self-Love podcast. Whether this is your first time listening and tuning in, thank you so much for being here with me today. And if you've listened to the Binge on Self-Love podcast before, thank you so much for coming back. This podcast is for everyone who did or who currently does struggle with self-acceptance in any shape or form, being it procrastination, eating disorder, negative body image, negative self-talk, low self-confidence, whatever it is. This podcast is here to share our stories and to support each other on our journeys. In today's episode, I want to share a couple of things that I've learned on my self-acceptance journey, which, by the way, is nowhere to be over. And one of my points that I'll talk later today is that I don't necessarily think self-acceptance is a journey that's ever going to end. But I'll talk more on that later. I hope you will find today's episode interesting. And now, without further ado, let's get into it. I feel like I should start by explaining what self-acceptance is to me and what I mean when I speak of my self-acceptance journey. I've spent a big part of my life dealing with procrastination, with eating disorders, and with an overall negative relationship, not just with my body, but with myself in general. And when I say a big part of my life, I mean well over a decade, even more. Ever since I was a little girl, I remember feeling like there's something wrong with me. I was really shy, really anxious. I had these different tics and rituals that no one really understood. As I got older, somewhere during my teenage years, I felt less and less confident in myself. I started nitpicking my looks, my thoughts, my opinions, my characteristics, and I started to dislike myself more and more. Then, at the age of 16 or 17, I developed anorexia, which later turned into binge eating disorder. All along, I was struggling with severe procrastination, the type of procrastination that you let take over your dreams, that you let ruin your opportunities, and that undermines your confidence every single day. So that's me in a nutshell. That's basically everything I've ever disliked about myself, and that's what affected my life the most. And now to why I'm even telling you all of this is to explain why I consider myself to be on a self-acceptance journey. Somewhere in my early 20s, mid-20s, I finally started my binge eating disorder recovery. I started seeing a therapist on a regular basis, and I've shifted my mindset in many ways to make my recovery possible. It's also something I've talked about in this podcast many times. With recovery, it's often not just one problem or one area that you struggle with. And once you start dealing with your problems, the deeper you go, the more you'll uncover. And it's almost like an onion you peel and peel and peel, and there's still more and more to uncover and to learn about yourself. It probably sounds way too dramatic, but the point is that once I started dealing with my binge eating disorder and I started my recovery journey, I soon understood that there's more to it than just food being my safe space that I turn to when I feel any type of way. And I realized and I admitted to myself that I have no confidence in myself. I don't believe I'll ever be able to achieve anything in general. I've also learned that because I don't believe in myself, I have a tendency to look for validation in other people, and therefore I often did things just to please others. I've realized that even my procrastination issues are maybe linked to my non-existence confidence and self-worth. I've learned that it's probably not okay and not normal to be talking about yourself as stupid, as fat, as ugly, as useless, as disgusting, as unworthy, and all these ugly things. And I've learned that it's probably not going to be easy for me to accept myself just the way I am when all those years I was doing everything but accepting myself for who I am. I've learned that even if I had a magic wand and I could change all of those things that I've disliked about myself, whether that's my personality or my looks, I still wouldn't feel happy. I wouldn't feel content with who I am. And for the past couple of years, ever since I've started working on my relationship with food and with my body, I've also been trying to work on all of these other things. So that's why I see all of it as some sort of self-acceptance journey. I'm trying to learn to be kinder to myself, but also more strict on myself when needed. I'm learning to be more acceptive of who I am as a person. I'm trying to remind myself that I am not perfect, but that's perfectly okay. And that I can love and accept myself even if I'm not perfect, even if I have all of these flaws. And like I've mentioned earlier, I don't know if there's a goal at the end of that journey. I don't really think that there is an end to it all. I don't think it's not really possible to just wake up one day and be like, okay, so I came to this place and I really, really love myself now and I'm going to feel like that for the rest of my life. I mean, it would be great if it worked like that, but I'm a little more realistic to know that everything's constantly changing and so will my body and my mind and my life. The word journey probably isn't the perfect word to describe it because it gives us a sense of a finish line at the end of a journey. So maybe an always evolving process would be a better term to describe it. So that's what self-acceptance is to me. And I'm saying self-acceptance on purpose because self-love is extremely overused. It's not like I've used it to name my podcast. And I personally like self-acceptance better because that's what my goal is. I want to be acceptive of who I am and not feel any negative emotions about it. And I don't want to constantly be judging every single inch of myself. Maybe your perception of self-love and of self-acceptance is different from mine, which is perfectly okay. I really believe it's important to take that phrase, self-acceptance or self-love, and tailor its meaning to you, because otherwise it's going to be just a general buzzword with no real meaning. So take that phrase, make it your own, and find what it means to you. So that's enough of me rambling. Now let's move to some of the things that I've learned and that I'm learning every day on my self-acceptance journey. One of those things being that with perfectionism mindset, you'll never get very far. What I mean by that is that if you constantly want everything to be perfect, you'll never get anything done. For example, I really struggled to be consistent with my workouts because whenever I would skip a workout that I've planned for whatever reason, I would be like, okay, so it doesn't really matter now. I can just as well not work out at all. There's no point in me trying if I can be consistent. Another example can be when I'm trying to work on something, whether it's a podcast episode or anything else. And let's say I want to spend 3 hours working on this thing, and I end up working on this thing for 2 hours and I end up procrastinating on it for 1 hour, in my mind, I see it as a failure because it's not perfect, because I expect everything to be perfect. I expect the circumstances to be perfect before I start something. I expect myself to perform perfectly, even if it's the first time that I'm doing something. I expect everything that I've planned to go perfectly. And this mindset never really got me anywhere other than feeling like a failure. If you'll wait for things to be perfect, you're likely to never get anything done because you'll be waiting forever. When I was recovering from a binge eating disorder, I expected that once I set my mind to recovery, I'll never binge eat again. And then I binged, and my world would fall apart because I expected everything to be perfect. It wasn't perfect. Recovery isn't a perfect road that you go by step, only moving forward. Recovery is challenging and it's anything but straightforward and perfect. And it takes a lot of energy and a lot of trials, and it takes a lot of changes. Same whenever I wanted to break my procrastination habit, I believed that I would do that by writing myself a super long to-do list and then miraculously forcing myself to tick every checkbox. And of course, that never happened. It's a process, it's a journey. It's not something you just change overnight. Having the perfectionism mindset doesn't help. If you want to go for a run, you can either go for a run or you can wait for a day when the weather is super nice, but it's not too warm or too cold, when it's not too crowded out there. You can wait for your new running outfit to arrive, for when you feel well rested and for when you feel in the mood to go out for that run, or you may as well wait forever. I get discouraged if I don't get something done perfectly. Let's say if I schedule 4 workouts for a week and I end up going twice or 3 times, I feel like I failed. I feel like those 2 or 3 workouts don't count. Or if I manage to stay binge free for days and then I binge eat on one day, I often feel like I failed. And the success that I've felt until this moment doesn't count. And that's bullshit. It all counts. No one can take that away from you. What's better, doing something and trying or not doing anything at all? What's going to bring you closer to a change that you want to achieve or to your desired goal? Some action or inaction. The only time I was ever able to see any results was when I've tried to be consistent with something. And I'm putting the emphasis on trying, not on being perfect at it. The second thing that I've learned is that self-acceptance is a process, not necessarily an end goal. I've mentioned earlier in this episode that I don't think self-acceptance or self-love is a goal that you achieve one day and from there on you never have to worry about it or think about it again. I don't think it works like that. I think self-acceptance, self-love, or relationship that you have with yourself is ever evolving. As human beings, we constantly evolve in our lives, in our opinions, in our values, in our relationships, in our careers, in our experiences. So how could the relationship we have with ourselves stay the same? Knowing it's ever evolving is not something that should be stressing the hell out of you. No, it should just remind us that the relationship we have with ourselves is also important and we should care about it. Looking back at where I was in terms of my relationship with myself a couple of years ago, I've gone a long way. I've achieved some major progress, but there still is a long way to go for me. There are new challenges that I've never faced before. There are situations I've never found myself in before. So I still have a lot to learn about myself. So that's why I think self-love, self-acceptance, or however you want to phrase it, is not an end goal, but it is a journey that's constantly evolving. Thing number 3 that I've learned is that sometimes you need to take a break and other times you need to push yourself. This thing is probably one of the hardest to learn in terms of differentiating when one should come before the other. I struggle a lot with procrastination when it comes to my personal goals and where I would like to see myself in the future. And I've learned that mostly it's just self-doubt and fear of the unknown and fear of failing. The only solution to that is to push myself and do it and not let myself overthink and overanalyze everything, because that's not going to get me anywhere. I know myself enough that if I'm supposed to be doing something that's out of my comfort zone, I tend to give up before I even give myself a chance to try. And that's exactly the moment when I need to know and differentiate that I need to push myself, no matter how I feel, how many reasons why it's better to stay in the comfort zone my mind came up with. But then there's also the other side of the coin, and that's knowing when pushing yourself won't get you any further, and you really just need to step away from something and take some time away. It may be something super simple like taking a day off from work or from gym, but it can also be something more difficult, like knowing that maybe this approach that you've been applying isn't really working and you need to try something else. I've mentioned in some of the episodes that thanks to my restrictive and binge eating cycles, I've built a resentful relationship with exercise. I hated it and I only saw it as a tool to torture myself and to punish myself and to undo the binge eating damage. And I know that I've kept pushing myself to exercise. It only made me feel worse. So I had to step away from it. I had to take a break from exercise. I've had to realize that I've been hating working out so much. So I stopped working out for quite a while. I found other activities that didn't bring those feelings in me, like walking or doing yoga. And as I was progressing in my recovery, I slowly found a way back to exercise, just in different and much healthier way. I'm saying this as an example that sometimes we need to push ourselves a little bit and be our own cheerleader. But sometimes we also need to be the grown-up telling us that this doesn't work and that we need to take a break. It's very hard. I'm not gonna lie that I'm perfect, or nor am I trying to be, but it's honestly very hard to differentiate when we need to do the first and when we need to do the latter. Thing number 4 that I've learned on my self-acceptance journey is that gratitude gets you further than self-hatred ever will. It sounds logical and obvious, but let's be honest and say that our actions don't always say so. In my case, this has a lot to do with my desire for perfectionism, so it becomes harder for me to appreciate even a little bit of progress, and I can often come across as ungrateful even though I have so much to be grateful for. I think that you can choose to hate yourself for not getting to point X, or you can be grateful for getting as close to the point X as you possibly could. I often choose the first and I feel even more frustrated and defeated, but those feelings never got me anywhere. No one ever built a happy life based on hating themselves. Whereas when you, on the contrary, try to be more grateful for where you're going on your journey, for things you already have and achieved, for people that you have in your life, you suddenly have a much better environment for further growth. I know it's hard sometimes to feel grateful for where you are in life, especially if everyone else seems to be reaching their goals and progressing faster than you seem to be. It's important to keep in mind that self-hatred won't get you very far. My point number 5 is that it's you against you. And I don't mean this in a negative sense, quite the contrary. Whenever you are working on a relationship with yourself, whether that's you as a whole, or whether that's your body or your body image or your relationship with food, what helps me to kind of stay on track and don't fall into this loophole of self-doubt is to remember that it's me against myself. There's nobody else I need to prove anything to. There's no one else I need to compare myself to, my body to, my achievements to. There's no one else I am competing with. It's just me and what my relationship with myself have been like in the past, and me against what I want my relationship to look like in the future. Oftentimes, I would make that mistake and compare myself to people offline and online, and I would be like, why I am not like this person? Why my journey doesn't look like this person's? Why my relationship with food isn't as flawless as this person's? But it's not me compared to other people. The self-acceptance journey is about me and myself only. My progress, my pace, my achievements, no matter how big or small they would be compared to somebody else. For me, they are huge achievements. So this is one of the most important lessons that I've learned, because the moment you start competing with someone else, you already lost. The sixth and final point is that past only matters so much. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I'm fully aware that how we approach our past is highly individual and it depends on what you've been through. But I personally noticed that I would often let my past dictate my present, not in a good way. I'll try to explain it. On my journey, when I would want to do something differently than I used to, or whenever I wanted to start something new, a new hobby, new approach, whatever, my mind would slip to the you've never been able to accomplish this or do this in the past, you're gonna fail. And I would already have this mindset that I'm already going to fail because I failed in the past, so why should I even bother trying? Maybe you've made certain decisions in the past that you wish you've done differently. Maybe you've done or said things you wish you hadn't, but we can't change our past. That's a fact. But what we can do is to choose how much we let past define who we are in the present and who we want to become in the future. Maybe some things you worked for in the past didn't turn out the way you hoped. Maybe you haven't worked as hard as you promised yourself in the past. Maybe you gave up on something that needed just a little more focus in the past. We all made mistakes in the past. We've all failed at some point. But that doesn't mean that just because we failed at something in the past, and I put air quotes on the word failed, we won't be able to succeed in the present or in the future. I've never had a super positive relationship with myself. I've never really believed in myself. But I also don't believe that it's something that I cannot change. I don't believe that just because things were a certain way in the past, that they have to stay the same forever. I'll wrap up the episode right here. I hope that some of the things I've came to realize on my self-acceptance journey maybe made you think about something, or that maybe you came up with your own things that you've learned on your journey. The most important outcome of this is that each and everyone's journey is unique, and there's no point in comparing yourself to anyone out there. Let me know what your thoughts are on this episode. You can DM me on Instagram at bingeonselflove, or you can send me an email at anci@bingeonselflove.com. Make sure to subscribe to the Binge on Self-Love podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and I'll be back next week. Until then, take care and talk to you soon.